our economy cannot sustain that. We would collapse more readily than the Soviet Union would.
We are free, we are America.
The scamming going on to pick winners and losers amongst nations with this global greening fraud is a political intrigue aimed at taking America and the dollar out of its preeminent position of authority between nations and states, which really makes us sort of a policeman to the world and gives the world some stability where we would step in and moderate and kind of hold things in a certain place. The real concern that President Trump is expressing, and that's part of this whole thing, is that if you take away the dollar as the reserve currency, or the currency that's being used good as gold between nations where energy is traded, which is what's really going on, the dollar's tied to energy or oil and gas. If you take that away and go to a basket of currencies, instead of it just being guaranteed by American stability, now it's Russia and China. Now it's the euro or other currencies, the BRICS, etc. And now their militaries come in and it becomes very hodgepodge. And so, how you start slicing and dicing the world up into various zones or regions for trade and agreement and stuff like that, the dollar comes off as the moderator and it starts to be a free-for-all. And, whenever, for example, you take out one mob family and you don't just get another one that comes to the top, you get 3 or 4 of them fighting for who gets to be in control. And in that power vacuum, it can get very messy. If the dollar is going to be removed as the world's reserve currency, then all of these others are going to want to move in to fill that vacuum, and you're going to have a free-for-all for a period of time while there's a new reset. And at the end of that, there will be a dominant currency. Is it BRICS? Is it the yuan out of China? Is it some combination that we haven't figured out yet? And in the course of that, because we've been exporting dollars out of America, and that's kept our dollar stable under this Federal Reserve System, a lot of those dollars start coming back to America, and it does what happened when we took down the Soviet Union. We allowed them to export rubles, and we bought them by covert means, and created a bank of rubles outside of the Soviet Union. Soviet Union had a law that didn't allow you to take rubles out of the country and trade them, but there was a finding under Reagan that if rubles did appear outside of a country, and it didn't say rubles, it just said a currency that's not freely traded outside the country according to laws of that nation, that those internal laws in that nation don't apply to stuff that shows up on the outside of that nation. Anybody's free to buy them. So literally crime figures and politicians and military figures began exporting rubles out of the Soviet Union, and we bought them on the free market outside. Some people had falsely claimed that we counterfeited rubles, which never, ever, ever, ever happened. We purchased those rubles outside the Soviet Union, created a store of them, and then at a particular point, and we were buying them with hard Western currencies, primarily the Deutschmark, the dollar, and the yen. Then we created a market for rubles. Then we began to sift them back in the Soviet Union over a short period of time. The ruble began to collapse because of all the rubles flooding back into the Soviet Union looking for goods. And their crime families began dismantling the country internally to get anything that wasn't nailed down in order to get Western currency and the rubles that we were sifting back in. It collapsed their economy. The Soviet Union collapsed. We won World War III without going to nuclear war. The threat for America is that if the dollar is no longer the reserve currency for the world, and those dollars start trying to race back into America, that you will have not just inflation of 7 or 8 or 9%, which our economy really can barely handle right now. You would have inflation at 30, 40, 100, 200% a year. Our debt system, our economy cannot sustain that. We would collapse more readily than the Soviet Union would. And that's exactly what the danger is. It would start with the regional banks and move towards just a handful of core banks at the center, half a dozen that would be in charge of the country. And that's the direction we're actually headed. Plus, the move out of the dollar into blockchain currencies, which was a DARPA operation. So in that scenario, the business of America is business. Our ability to transact business at the speed of inflation, to order and build and deliver goods in a timely fashion in a high inflation situation, even a hyperinflation situation, is not going to happen. And America would be on the ropes very, very, very quickly. And that is, in fact, what's in the offing.
We are at war. Join me the first Thursday monthly at 4:30 p.m. Eastern for a discussion with Juan O'Savin on the John and Juan Intel and Insight Show 30-minute program for critically important updates, intel, and analysis. No noise, interruptions, distractions, or sensationalism. Just critically important information you need to hear at this precise moment in time in our war. Visit ampnews.us, wake up and step up, and may God be with you.